Well, g'day, Flat Earth Aussie Jesus here, otherwise known as Ross Thatcher. Just thought I'd have a little discussion. There's always things on my mind. Thought I may or may not go for a walk this evening and end up getting too late too soon, and my hair's getting in my face. So I'll do something about that. Um, I just wanted to discuss several things on my mind, one of which is my favourite topic, which is in fact natural healing, whether you know it or not. These are the hands of a natural healer. That's always been my intention ever since I was a young child, to learn to become a healer. And when I was about 16, 17, I came across a book. It was called Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System, and it changed my life. I learnt all about how we heal ourselves through dietary means. I've had it reconfirmed through, I wouldn't say dozens, but through a multitude of various means. The Essene Gospel of Peace, one of my favourite books, which anybody can Google, or you can find on my channel, where I've actually read it out loud for people too lazy to read. You can discover that one of the main methods how Jesus healed people was through the same methods of correcting your diet, stop sinning, which is basically eating the wrong things, the incorrect things for the human body, and fasting, and then therefore going and sinning no more once you were healed, once you got through the whole healing process. It's not an overnight process. It's not an instant touch of the hand that's going to instantly cause a miracle. When Jesus cured people of incurable diseases, it was a process that took sometimes many weeks, at least many days, but often a few weeks at least. Sometimes people gloss over his methods of making people well, as though all they had to do was magically touch his clothing or something and they're instantly better, or all he had to do was lay hands on them. Now, I can give a rational explanation for virtually every single one of the so-called miracles that Jesus was alleged to have performed. They're not rocket science at all. Jesus even said that the day will come when all men will come to do as he has done and more. And he basically said that because we were going to gain in knowledge and spiritual wisdom and hopefully get more in tune with our natural selves as we grow and advance in humanity. It's now been roughly 2,000 years later, and a lot of people still have trouble comprehending. Like, for example, raising Lazarus from the dead. Well, as he said, he wasn't dead, he was just sleeping, which basically meant the dude was in a coma, probably from some sort of body fatigueness. G'day, Billy Ballbag, you philosophical bastard, Jack. How are you, mate? Just having a rant tonight. Nothing too specific, but talking natural health and healing, and yeah, being a philosophical bastard. That's what I do. Moon landing denier space is fake. G'day. Good to see you, whoever you may be. Yeah, look, man, I don't just talk flat earth truth. There's many other things that appeal to me as a truther and a philosopher. And flat earth is just one of many things. It's one of my biggest things, I must admit. I love the flat earth. I think it's just brilliant. But natural health and healing. Queensland. Woohoo! Which part of Queensland, man? I'm just in northern New South Wales, not far from Tweed Heads, really. About a 3/4 hour trip from Tweed Heads. Anyway, I was talking about the so-called miracles of Jesus Christ, the famous healer from a long time ago. And yeah, when he healed, brought Lazarus back from the dead, as he said, he was just sleeping. He was in a coma. He possibly used something like smelling salts or some sort of massage. Or there is some sort of techniques that a Reiki healer can actually do to reawaken or revitalize somebody in the condition of a coma without necessarily bringing somebody back from the dead, where your body quickly starts to decompose within an hour or two. The minute everything shuts down, all the bacteria that our bodies harbour immediately start going into decomposition mode. Rigor mortis kicks in within an hour, but a person can stay in coma for days, weeks, months, years, in some cases. So he explained that one quite well when he I grew up in Newcastle. I went to Raymond Terrace High, well, from the age of 13, year 9 onwards. Where was I? Beer o'clock. Oh yeah. So when he healed a person of blindness, he made a crude paste in the dust or the sand. He actually used his own spit, made a paste, rubbed it into his eyes, told him to go and wash it out in the stream and be able to see again. It was just a very, very ancient, crude form of getting rid of somebody's cataracts. It was cataract surgery as it needed to be done at the time with what was available. Hence why he said the day will come when all men will do as he has done and more. And therefore now we can use lasers and shit, and we can do it far, far better, as he well predicted. Every single one of his so-called miracles has a rational, logical explanation when you look at it from a healer's perspective. Steady on mild, I need to take the piss, mate, so don't you try, mate. Yeah, I think he's gone already. It says there's only one viewer now. I don't know who this moon landing is fake person is, but anyway, all are welcome to my channel. All are welcome to make a comment, and I'll try and respond to them, as long as I don't lose my train of thought too much. So what I wanted to really talk about is the whole reason I moved up to this Byron Bay region back in the first place was because it was famous to me for its natural healing, its natural spiritualism, the easternmost point of the Australian mainland. And I knew that the local university at Lismore, I don't even think it was called the Southern Cross back then, but it soon was. The Southern Cross University ran a naturopathy course, and so my intention was, oh well, I'll move up here. My girlfriend at the time, she dropped out of Newcastle Uni. She was studying nursing, but every time it came to doing the injections, she just couldn't get over it. She just couldn't do it. So she ended up dropping out and said, all right, let's drop out and we'll move up to Byron Bay, as I wanted to do, as I'd already came and visited for a few months and stayed at a mate's place in Butler Street there. Much to her chagrin, she didn't like that much because she was back at uni at Newcastle, but I said, oh well, I'm going up to Byron Bay just to check it out, and stayed for 3 months, got on the dole and so forth. So anyway, we moved up together, and she decided to go back to uni herself too, study nursing again. Didn't work. She dropped out again when it came to the injection bit. But when it came to me enrolling, I missed out by about 2 weeks for the enrolment cut-off date, and I thought, oh, that's cool. Have my year off, do your gap year, and I'll just chill out in Byron Bay for a year. Yeah, especially if I was a junkie too. I said, come on, bitch, shoot it up. So I had my gap year, ended up getting a few different casual jobs, ended up getting one cleaning the Great Northern as a pub cleaner at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. We ended up buying a caravan, lived at Crosby's Caravan Park, which is across from the golf course between Byron and Suffolk. And just found the lifestyle was too good that the next year came around, I didn't bother re-enroll or re-attempting to enroll in naturopathy, simply because You know, and there's a good reason for it. My sister, her and I used to, we hated each other as kids. She's like 2 years younger than me. But as we grew older, we ended up completely unknown to each other. We had so much in common. She was right into natural health, got into yoga, vegetarianism, and all this sort of stuff. And I found I had a really lot in common with her. And she decided she was going to be a naturopath as well. But she's got a stronger mind than me to actually follow through with things. And so before I had the chance to enroll in the course, she enrolled in a similar course, the same basic course, but at a private college down in Sydney, where she met her first husband. And she ended up changing. And so we'd have schmiggy schmodler. So we ended up having, g'day mate, discussions which ended up getting heated, where she went from being a vegetarian, almost vegan type person. Oh, she still ate her eggs and cheese and stuff, shit, so she was nowhere near vegan, but her and both her future husband, when they visited his parents down in Canberra one time, had the lamb roast or whatever for Christmas dinner. And because her training says that our blood type should be eating red meat, she totally changed and became a different person. And I disagreed with her teaching so much that I thought, well, I'm not going to go and get this official brainwashing indoctrination that she's doing and think that I'm going to become a trained naturopath going through the official lines. What I will do is I'll just learn it all for myself. You know, I'm a self-educated person, and I learn through my own readings and my own experiences. So I just thought, well, I'll be a living example, and if people want to learn from me, I mean, at 30 years of age, I still look 20. I'm about to be 48 this year. I think I'm doing okay for a 48-year-old dude, you know. I've got a couple of wrinkles around the eyes and stuff, but apart from that, I mean, my previous partner, it's going back a couple of years now, she used to just go on and on about how smooth and youthful my skin is, and how she loves the softness of my hair and all this sort of stuff. So I'm a healthy, vital, young 48-year-old. And so I thought, well, eventually people are going to catch on and say, well, what's your secret? And so I'd be able to teach people my secret. I had a friend some years back, just as my marriage fell apart actually, I met her, of all places, playing canasta online. Another online friend decided to teach me how to play canasta, and I'm a bit of a card player when it comes down to it. Euchre was more my thing, but canasta, when I learnt it, I got a bit addicted to it for a while, and I ended up meeting this woman all the way from New York playing canasta one night, and somehow we just hit it off. Like, I wasn't even trying, I'm not even looking for someone, you know, I'm a married dude, just staying up late, playing a card addiction game, and we got chatting, and somehow I just ended up being on the money with the most hilarious, funniest things you could possibly say. You know, I ended up basically talking, you know, about golden showers and that, and she was just literally wetting herself with laughter. And so she chased me up, we kept sort of meeting, and we became really good friends as a result of playing canasta. And while you're playing canasta, you've got online chat, just like Messenger type of thing, like Yahoo Messenger, I guess, but you're playing cards at the same time, and we got to become really good friends. And then when my marriage fell apart, I was almost like to be able to stick it in my ex's face and say, yeah, well, I've already got somebody else, and we've already had a little online affair type thing. I know, I'd never ever cheated on my wife, but that's the closest I ever came online cheating at a time when our marriage was basically done anyway. So as I became friends and got to know her better and better, I soon found out that she was involved in the clean-up after 9/11. Her and her mother both volunteered as cleaners in the aftermath, and both of them developed serious cancer. She ended up being diagnosed with severe brain and liver cancer. Her mother, on a similar sort of note, decided to follow the doctor's advice, and she went down the path of chemotherapy, and within about 3 months she was dead. And so my friend, Hannah, said that she was not going to go down that path. She refused to use chemo and she'll just let the cancer slowly kill her. So I says to her, well, I could probably help you with that if you're willing to listen to some advice. I'm not really reading the comments that much. I said, if you're willing to listen to some advice, I said, if you follow my advice, I will help you with your situation. So she says, yes, I trust you implicitly. She really did. She could see that I was an intelligent person with good intentions. And so I said, all you have to do is replace one meal every day with this particular recipe. It's a simple recipe. I said, just get yourself a decent vegetable juicer and get beetroot, carrot, maybe 2 carrots, an apple, maybe 2 apples, some sticks of celery and a bunch of parsley. Juice that and replace 1 meal per day with that. And I guarantee you will see results. Well, not only did she do that, but she actually went further and replaced 2 meals per day with that recipe. And within 3 months, when she went back to the doctors said that all the cancer was disappearing and that whatever you're doing, keep doing that because it's working. The unfortunate side effect was she also happened to be a large woman and she lost heaps and heaps of weight and ended up having all this baggy skin all over her. But the cancer disappeared and a year later there wasn't a trace of it. She'd lost a bunch of weight. The doctor still tried to do weird things to her, like saying, oh, well, you've lost too much fluids, we'll have to put you on a drip to replace all these fluids. So they'd give her saline injections and they'd take the bloody saline bag straight out of the fridge, hook her up to an IV drip and just make her just shiver and freeze, so she'd have to put multiple blankets on as part of the treatment because they had to do something, you know. She was naturally curing herself by following smart advice, and here they are trying to still make her sick and unwell. $100 salt water, yeah, and the bags cost less than $1. It's ridiculous. But, you know, the chemotherapy would have been thousands, so they had to get something out of her before she died. We ended up losing contact, you know, down the track, but you know, my life moved on. You know, like she even suggested I find somebody else. I found somebody else. The rest is history. Found several others since, actually, to be honest, and that's how it goes. Cheers, mate. So, basically, yeah, that's always been my goal, is to be a natural healer and to understand the way we heal naturally. And the very first book I read that put me on the right path was by one Professor Arnold Ehret. I can strongly recommend him. He was back in the 1900s. He was a natural healer. He didn't have, well, he was a professor, so I guess he had some sort of qualifications. But what happened is all these people were being diagnosed with diseases which the doctors could basically just wash their hands of and said, it's incurable, there's nothing we can do to help you, you're basically just going to die. And so what he did is he set up a sanitarium, a healing place where people could go to, and he healed them. And he did it basically through the simple methods of fasting. Fasting is the number one method of healing, but it can also be quite dangerous because as you fast, you release a lot of toxins. I have made some quite lengthy, detailed videos on this subject before, so I won't go into it too much. Basically, it can be done once you start releasing your toxins and you start alkalizing the body, which is what he was all about. If you go into a fruitarian diet, you start alkalizing the body, mostly through fasting and through cleansing and just getting rid of all the toxic shit. Now, he taught that the average human body upon death would be holding at least 10 pounds of accumulated, uneliminated feces, which just festers in our bowel, our long intestine, for basically our entire lifetime. And if you can cleanse your body of that, that's when you start to experience superior health. You don't get sick. You don't crave these sick, sugary, fatty foods, the things that cause mucus. That's why his healing method was called the mucusless diet healing system. Completely unrelated doctor at a completely unrelated time, some 20 years or so later, developed his own healing system with the exact same principles, but he called it the acid acidless diet instead of mucusless. But it's exactly the same thing. Acid creates mucus. Alkaline creates sharpness, health, vitality, full aliveness. Like Arnold Ehret was famous for doing these super long fasts, 45 days. I can't remember exactly what the longest one he did, but it's like 65 days or something perhaps, where every day he would also perform public exhibitions of great feats of strength and agility and exercise, proving that we don't need food to be our energetic source if we're getting it from living air, the prana, the life force, which is what we are. We are air-breathing creatures, and it's proof that the heart is not the pump. Our lungs are. We operate under air pressure. That's why we live here as air-breathing creatures under air pressure. The heart is just a valve, and it regulates the heartbeat. And the more you speed it up, the more you breathe faster, the more your heartbeat speeds up, and the more vitality you exhibit. So drink warm lemon water. Yeah, that's quite true, a lot of that. But the thing is, our biggest problem is actually overeating. What we really need to do is fine-tune our bodies to live off the smallest amounts of food. Like the ideal diet is merely basically less than 1 cup, half a cup even, of food per day. And if it's the right type of food, that is more than enough than we need to sustain our bodies if we are living in a good environment, free from pollution, full of good smells and sounds of nature, where there's lots of natural negative ions in the air, like around the ocean and forests and mountains and so on, away from the cities and the destructive noise that harms us internally. We basically have it totally wrong with our idea of how we should be using grain. Grain is not a natural food for humans the way we use it. It can be a superfood for humans if we learn to use it correctly. The way we are currently using it is we collect the grain, we dry it out, we grind it up, we take out the flour, we throw away the meal, and then we make it into a sticky paste. We add yeast to it and maybe sugar or whatever else to turn it into something that's slightly edible. Then we bake it so it turns into a loaf, and then we make cakes or loaves of bread or something like that. That is not the way grains should be eaten. The way grains should be eaten is because grains are full of a thing called enzyme inhibitors. The way we age is because we use up our own enzymes to digest dead food. But the grain can have the enzyme inhibitors reawakened, re-alive, by soaking them in water. Soak them in water overnight. The following day, drain the water out, wash them again, and drain them and leave them to dry slightly, and they will start to sprout. Within about 2 or 3 days, you've got sprouted grains. You rinse them once or twice a day, depending on the temperature, and eventually you've got living grains which have inactivated that enzyme inhibitor, so now they're full of enzymes. Then on the last day, you put them out in the sunlight, where they capture the sun and create a whole heap of chlorophyll, which is a superfood that removes all the toxins from us, gives us this living energy. That's where all living energy comes from, is from the sun. And when you've got it only takes like a tablespoon of wheat grain to make an entire loaf of bread. And the way they're called Ancestor Bread, how they did it, is they then take these sprouted grains as soon as they're showing signs of greenness, mash them sort of roughly into a rough sort of paste, flatten them out into a flat bread, put them on a hot rock in the sun. And then at midday you turn it over and cook the other side. That's how you cook, never any hotter than sun temperature. And it gets full of living, abundant energy. It becomes the sweetest sweet bread. And that is when Jesus then taught us this prayer of how to live. Give us this day our daily bread. It is all we need, no more than 1 tablespoon of grain per day. If you sprout it and prepare it properly, every single day you start again with a fresh batch and keep doing it. And because I lived in the desert, of course, you always had a place to put a flat rock out in the sun. We might have a bit more trouble in places where we live, but that's the basic principle of it. When you understand the basic principle, then you might have to ad-lib and say, oh, well, I'll make some alfalfa sprouts this time, or some sunflower sprouts, or we've got a lot of choices today. But that is how we should be treating our grains, not grinding them up into this merely paste and making a dead product, but making a living product to give us living vitality, to give us super strength. And we can, once you've trained your body not to live off tons and tons of food 3 meals a day, but actually small amounts, you find yourself amazing energy, amazing strength. As I say, a lot of these comments are just going straight past me, so I'm not reading all of them. I have to strain my eyes a little bit on this little phone screen. But yeah, that is basically one of the keys to health, vitality, and longevity. What am I drinking? It's called homebrew. It's Cooper's homebrew. It's basically that, but I made it myself. I actually used like dark ale and real ale combined together with natural raw sugar, natural raw honey, a few herbs and spices that I don't divulge to just everybody, a bit of raw ginger juice, and I ferment it. In fact, I just bottled another lot today. New Age BS. It's not New Age BS, mate. This is ancient knowledge that we have been living with for thousands of years. For the people who become masterminds do so because they've trained their bodies for pure health and vitality. You will not get a clear thinking mind with a polluted body. If your body's polluted with the flesh and stench of dead animals and eggs and dairy and all this unnatural food that creates mucus, that's where disease comes from, and it clogs up your thinking facilities as well. It gets into your brain and it just, it's like puts fat on your brain. I'm thinking of this person, actually, that's what inspired me to even make this rant this evening. A bloke who calls himself Godless Engineer. And when I listened to him, he actually moderated my first live debate I've ever had on the Non Sequitur show against Quaig. Honey is from bees and it's an absolute superfood. This bloke, Godless Engineer, and he just comes across as an absolute dumb fuck. I don't normally like to swear. I do. But yeah, what a dumb, slow. And then when you look at him, what's his name? Mr. Cheswick. He made this video the other day, you have to see it, about Godless Engineer. I can't even recall now off the top of my head what it's called or anything, but it's a parody about how fat he is. And he really took the shit out of him, which was a little bit unkind, I will admit, but it was hilarious. You just have to look up Mr. Cheswick and go through some of his videos. He does some awesome parodies of people who are anti-flat earth. And the one he did against Godless Engineer, I was just like, that was fucking awesome. Well done, mate. But this is the trouble. But people who are overweight, carrying around all these extra pounds, they are also clogging up their minds as well as their bodies and leading themselves to an early grave, to an unhealthy state. The true way to health and vitality is through superfoods. Manuka honey is brilliant. All honey is brilliant. Just because it's from bees, it's also from bees, from plants, from flowers, gathering the highest nectar of life from flowers. So they're doing the job that we can't possibly do. They're like the super workers creating a super food for humans. Now, if we can gather it without harming the bees, that's the most ideal situation. But Honestly, bee products are the absolute best. The absolute top of all the bee products is the one they make for the queen bee. And she grows to like twice the size of a normal worker bee because she's fed on royal jelly her entire life. And she lives like some... I have to think about that now. I can't remember exactly how many. I think she lives 30 times longer, as well as pumping out her own body weight 30 times per day of eggs. She's just becomes this super producer because all she's ever fed is royal jelly. Now, royal jelly, if you look into it, it's got all the essential amino acids that our human bodies require from an external source. Our body can produce a lot of our essential amino acids, but there are some that we can't. And the way that they are produced in royal jelly is in the exact right proportions that the human body requires for supreme health and gain and vitality. So if you are living on superfoods, not polluting your body with dead animals, you're eating sprouted grains rather than dead ground up grains, if you're going to eat grains at all, you're eating freshly picked fruits and vegetables with minimal cooking, and you supplement with a bit of honey and royal jelly, then you will experience supreme health. You might even grow a decent beard. Some people can't do that because they don't eat the right diet. Dates have... let's hit that one. Have the exact right proportions of nutrients we need to. Yeah, a lot of fruits do. That's the thing with fruits. If you get fruits, and again, the biggest problem is most people overeat. They overconsume foods. And what the body does when you get an overconsumption is it compensates for that, and so then it starts expelling nutrients. But if you starve your body of nutrients, basically, like most poor people end up having to do from necessity, not from choice. But what you find is that when you get that small amount of real foods, like dates or whatever you naturally find, figs, plums, cherries, whatever fruit comes naturally in season, that your body takes in everything good from it, uses that to then cleanse your body and expel out all the unnecessary wastes that are no longer serving their purpose. But most people, with their 3 meals a day, their bacon and eggs in the morning, or their processed cereal with milk, or, it frightens me, the stuff that people do to their bodies. They start clogging it up. And then by lunchtime they're starving again, because what they've done is they've created a condition that is so unnatural that their body, as soon as it finally gets through the process of digesting it as best as it can and getting it down into the intestine where it wants to start trying to eliminate it, it goes into what we call withdrawal symptoms. No different from any drug addict trying to overcome any sort of drug that they might take. As soon as the drug wears off, they need another fix, because all of a sudden you're feeling uncomfortable because your body's going back into healing mode now. As soon as the body goes into healing mode, it's very uncomfortable. You've created a very uncomfortable condition. The body doesn't like it, or you don't like it, because the condition is... it feels really bad. But as soon as you have another meal, all of a sudden your body goes back into emergency mode, and rather than deal with this healing condition as wanting to go through, which you always have to feel worse before you feel better, it says, oh, I feel better now because I'm dealing with a new emergency. I've got another fix. Oh, and so all I must have been was hungry. And so you trick your mind into thinking, oh, I was just feeling hungry, rather than actually accepting the fact that you will have to get worse before you get better if you're living in a diseased, unclean condition. It's just a fact of life you're going to have to face. So most of us are experiencing it. No matter how smart or wise we might think we are, most of us are living in a very diseased state. And I went through it myself. I've been through it. most unpleasant experience when you first begin to fast and stop putting these unnatural dead foods into your body. You will get withdrawal symptoms. It's just a fact of life. And in fact, this is one of the things that I think Jesus taught in the Essene Gospel, is that, you might suffer, our bodies basically replace their cells and everything every 7 years. So for every 7 years, basically you've replaced every cell in your body. So it's called, if for the last 7 years you've sinned, that the Father is very forgiving, and the Mother, if you start to follow her angels and fast and cleanse, and that you can be forgiven 7 years of sin in 7 days, which means 7 days of fasting. And it's the most painful process, but the first 3 days are the most painful. Once you get through that, all of a sudden you start to feel good. You start to feel revitalised again, and you start to think, I don't want to put those dead foods into my body again anymore. And then after 7 days, if you can handle that, you've pretty much healed yourself. You might have to get rid of all your parasites and stuff. That can be a painful process. But once you get over your addictions, detox, and then stop going back to these deadly, toxifying foods, you no longer crave them. And it's a great feeling of freedom to say, you walk through a supermarket and you look at all that dead flesh and you go, how could people possibly do that to their bodies? Look at these obese people, can barely walk, they're crippled and they got all sorts of illnesses and injuries, walking canes and all sorts of shit, because they can't hold themselves upright, but they still go and buy all their meat. They still go and fill their trolley full of all this dead, processed shit, because they're addicted to something just exactly like a drug addict is. It's no different. It's just an addiction. Once you get over it and overcome it and start to want living foods only, health and vitality all the way. And so, I cop a little bit of flack for drinking my homebrew tonics, but I'll tell you what, it is a living food, because the yeast is actually still alive. It's fermented the sugar from being a toxic product into a superfood. Whether you believe it or not, ethanol is actually a superfood. It's a super energy, it's a super antibiotic. It stops the water from going bad in the bottle. Because can you imagine if you did just bottled water and left it sitting like that for weeks without putting anything in it, like chlorine or bleach or something deadly and toxic into it, just how much the bacteria would have built up during that time. But the alcohol is actually a preservative, and it just makes it better and better over time. Again, that's what the Egyptians used to do. They fed their workers. A lot of people might have called them slaves, but most of them were actually not necessarily slaves, but free people. They fed them beer instead of water, because they realised that by fermenting sugar into it, you killed off all the nasties that might have otherwise been in stored water, and the people didn't get ill, and they were happy, because you're drinking beer. It's good for you. I missed that comment. I wonder if I can hit. Alcohol is yeast shit, man. That's quite possibly. But I guess you might have a point there. Yeast shit, if you look at it like that. But then again, honey is bee vomit. So you can't knock nature just because the nature of it doesn't necessarily agree with things that we would ordinarily like to eat. Nature knows what it's doing. And beer is a naturally fermented product, just like people drink kombucha these days as a bit of a superfood. That's not exactly my cup of tea. I tried making it for a little while and eventually decided, damn it, missed that one too. I like cider, but it doesn't like me. Yeah, because a lot of these things that are made commercially, though, they're not made to the natural standards how we traditionally would have made fermented foods. What they do with most everything, even commercially bought beers, the only one that I know that doesn't do it, to my knowledge, is Cooper's. I'm sure there'll be plenty of others that don't. But what they do is once they've made the beer and all the sugar's fermented, they then actually heat it to evaporate all the alcohol out of it, so then it becomes basically brown water. And then they usually ferment a different type of alcohol, usually like a cheap wine type alcohol, but they may use the one they evaporated, you would hope. And then just re-add then exactly whatever the alcohol content is supposed to be. If it's meant to be 4.5% alcohol, as by the standard label that they have to sell it from under government law, then they add that back into it. And again, that heating process kills off all the yeast and basically makes it a dead product. But then the alcohol still makes it a preserved product. So if you keep it under, keep it in a box, and then once you refrigerate it, it's still beer in a sense, but it's not a living beer. It's just a beer product. And to me, you have to have it bottle fermented or keg fermented, I guess. But even a lot of keg fermented ones, like at the pub, aren't exactly what you think they are either. The bubbles actually come from artificially carbonating it at the point of sale. Whereas, bottle fermented means you add extra sugar at the point of bottling, and then after about 2 weeks, that sugar ferments and creates enough pressure to give it the natural bubbles. That's how beer is supposed to be, in my opinion. Other people have their own opinions, and I'm cool with that. Each to their own, but you won't catch me drinking shit beer if I have a choice. I missed that one again. Yeah, I've got it on the sideways screen at the moment, so it's a bit hard to scroll back. It only goes so far, but then they just fade again. But it's all good. There's a little button I can click if I do feel like reading it. So, natural health and vitality, to me, is the birthright of every human being. And it saddens me that most people aren't interested, because they only want to eat for comfort and for pleasure and because I like it, because this is what we've always done. And fortunately, my kids are pretty smart. My youngest one voluntarily became vegan when she was younger. And it was a pain in the butt, actually, because, I still do eat chicken. It's the one meat I will eat. And I will say it's because after my years of research, I used to buy a lot of health cookbooks and stuff as well. The one that I've got called Zen Macrobiotic Cookbook is all about cooking for macrobiotic health. And it explains yin and yang. And that's exactly the same thing as these other people I was talking about. Acid, alkaline, mucus, non-mucus. So the whole idea of macrobiotic cooking is to get as much alkaline food as possible, which they claim brown rice is the best. It gets the rating of 5 from 1 to 5. And then in the minus side, you've got your red meats and stuff, which are like -3, very acid forming, where all your egg and dairy is, all down in the yin side of things. But a neutral food, 2 neutral foods on their scale are chicken and fish. And so while they say there's no real great benefit from eating them, there's no real great harm. But if you eat too much yin food, you need to balance it with far more yang food to compensate. Most people don't compensate, they just eat more and more yin food, and then wonder why they end up getting cancers and all that sort of stuff. So the more yang food you eat, the better. Some neutral food, it's okay. It's not an ideal situation, but it's better than eating yin food and saying, I love my steaks, I'm a real man because I eat steak. I eat my sausages and my, These people have just got issues, addiction issues, and eating steak does not make you a man. It makes you a dead man faster than you would be. And as I was saying before about digestive enzymes, living foods produce their own enzymes, so they don't tax your enzyme potential, which is finite. We have an enzyme potential, which is what they didn't realise our appendix is for. It produces digestive enzymes. We produce them in our saliva, so you have to chew your food. If you're going to eat, like I said, that healthy juice I recommended before, you have to, the saying is, you drink your eats and you eat your drinks. So if you're having a drink, you take a small sip and you make sure you eat it. You don't just swallow it straight down. Mix it with the digestive enzymes from your saliva and swallow it, because that will then mix with the living enzymes already in it, because it's a living food from a living fresh juice. And therefore you're not taxing your finite enzyme potential, which causes premature aging, which is why some people age much faster than others, because they're taxing their enzyme potential the whole time. So anytime you're eating dead foods, like dead flesh, overcooked, or even just cooked foods in general, you've killed off the living enzymes. Therefore your body has to produce its own in order to digest it, therefore premature aging. Eating living foods, superfoods, healthy foods, doesn't tax your enzyme potential, so you don't age nearly as fast as other people. Hence why, as much as I don't like to brag, sometimes I do, I think I do look okay for a nearly 50-year-old dude. I'll just scroll through a couple of these comments. Eastern philosophy is absolutely right. Okay. Yeah, I was just going to answer that one, Billy, but if you've got to go, you've got to go. Yes, I have studied Eastern philosophies. In fact, I was raised Catholic, was brought up in the Catholic tradition, used to go to church every Sunday. Didn't necessarily believe it all. In fact, the more I went, the more I looked around as I got older and looked at the hypocrisy. All these people giving lip service to their beliefs, but not even coming close to believing it. They're saying, praying for everlasting life, performing these magic rituals up at the altar, turning bread into the flesh of Christ and wine into the blood. I mean, I'm thinking this is a bit of a cannibalistic ritual here, isn't it? Are we really wanting to and thinking that eating the flesh and blood of Christ is going to give us everlasting life? I just could not quite get my head around that. And eventually at the point at about 14, 15, I just said, no, I'm not going to church anymore. No, I'm not going. When I got back from the States, I spent a year over there as an exchange student. The whole year while I was 16, basically, because their year starts at the end of June, I think, or beginning of July. I turned 16 towards the end of June, winter solstice here in Australia, actually. And spent a year over there. When I got back, completely non-religious by this stage. While I was at school, I basically dropped out of school because I was not interested in the indoctrination anymore. I could see through it all. I could see what a farce it was. The whole year over in the States just totally opened my eyes to what schooling is really all about, even though I already had a fair good idea. But over there, they're basically military indoctrination centres, way below our standards here in Australia, like by 2 years below for the equivalent of age. And even then, the blokes who are like the top of their level at the advanced levels was pretty mediocre by my standards. And, anyway, I'm not here to knock the Americans. There's some really good people over there. I met some great people, and most of you are really lovely people. So don't get me wrong, you're very hospitable, but just a little bit on the dull side, if I may say so. And not your fault either. It's your indoctrination centres, it's your dietary systems, it's everything. But where was I going with this? Okay, so when I was back at high school, I used to just not go to most of my classes. Instead, if I was at school, if I decided not to, go down the street and hitch back home, it was like an hour, 15-minute bus trip each way, so hitching could be a bit quicker than the bus, but half the time I just go down the street and go and buy a bottle of OP rum and a bottle of Coke, even though I was underage. They never asked me for ID, and I just sit down in the park, drink that, waltz back up to school and catch the bus home. Sometimes, most of the time hitched home. But other times I'd stay at school, and instead of going to class, because I was a senior student, we had a seniors room in our library, and I'd spend a lot of time up in there, and I'd just go through the books, and my favourite section was actually the Eastern religion section, and so I ended up reading a lot of stuff about Zen Buddhism, and Alan Watts was a great author. I think I stole one of his books. I might be the only person in history that's actually stolen books on Zen Buddhism and karma. But, it wasn't really stealing, it was just burrowing a little bit more permanently than what you normally do at a library. But anyway, I loved the books, and getting right into Zen Buddhism and practicing what it preached, I loved the philosophy all behind it. It actually brought me back to a greater understanding of who Christ was and what he was actually teaching. And it had nothing to do with this Catholic religion I was raised in. It actually really opened my eyes. And eventually I brought this book, which I've read a bit from before, called The Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. And it starts talking about all his missing 18 years, where that's what he did during this time. He travelled all through India, Tibet, possibly China, maybe even Japan. It doesn't go into too great a detail about all the places he visited, but he certainly went to many of these places, especially India, where he learnt from the highest schools of learning. He learnt the healing arts, he learnt the greatest philosophies. He didn't just pick this stuff up because he was some magical child of God dude. He was a human being who physically learnt the true arts of healing and knowledge, which today we have the fortunate ability to not have to travel. We can actually find much of this same sort of stuff on the internet if we know where to look. A lot of it is actually probably nowhere near as authentic as getting the hands-on experience from the true healers and true mystics and so forth, and many of these hidden schools of knowledge, much of which has been destroyed. But still, we do have the opportunity to learn and to share knowledge in a far easier way today, which again is why Jesus said that the time will come when all men will do as he has done and more. And we're reaching that time. We are reaching a time of Christ consciousness that we can all achieve if we desire it. Knock and you shall receive. Ask and it shall be yours. But the path isn't always easy, as they say. Many are called, few are chosen. Still a book on karma, yeah, mate. Yeah, I've been paying for it ever since. One of these days I better... Oh, look, it's not like I haven't passed on the knowledge, It's not necessarily stealing if you're absorbing the knowledge and passing it on. Discipline. It takes a lot of discipline, for sure, to reach. It would depend what you want to reach. If you really desire Christ consciousness, you will discipline your body. You will go through the pain it takes to do the fasting, healing, and the ridicule that you will cop as well. Sometimes my ex used to think I was crazy. When I did reach a point one time of enlightenment, I even said to her, I'm almost at the point where I was going to go into a vow of silence. And she was just like, well, if you really had done that, then I'm absolutely out of here. And I'm like, yeah, I can understand that. But that's just how I felt in that state of higher consciousness. I'd never really been good at meditating, but when I reached that point, it just came naturally to me. And when I had the time through the day, I just naturally go and sit out in my backyard with my back against a tree or something and quietly, calmly meditate, quite naturally, without... It's not something you can try to do, really, but once you naturally want to do it, or I don't know, it just comes to you. And it's like, wow, this is just the most blissful, best thing, because stilling your mind and clearing your mind and not having any other concern in the world is part of what you must do to really find enlightenment. One day, when I went out and meditated, nearly said that wrongly, I took a book out with me. It's another one of these, it's a Hindu book. It's like their Bible in a way, but it's a bit more of a storybook. It's called the Bhagavad-Gita. And I've never really had the time to sit down and read it. But what I did on this particular day, instead of actually reading it, I just opened up each page and just looked at it and just kept turning. And it's as though every single word absorbed itself just directly into my mind. It was incredible. I read the entire book in under 10 minutes. And I mean, I couldn't quote from it again afterwards, don't get me wrong. It's not as though I memorised the book, but I absorbed it. And I think that's something we can do once we awaken our inner psychic. I had another book. I never read the entire thing either. It was always sitting on the shelves, but it says everyone is psychic. And I read a fair bit of it, but it's a fact. Every single one of us is psychic. And when we open ourselves to knowledge and so forth, you don't necessarily even have to read the book. You can have it sitting on your shelf there for years, or you can just put it under your pillow, and you will absorb the knowledge and the truth that's within it. It's always good to read it, of course. You know, you get a lot more out of it from doing that. But sometimes it's not completely necessary. You know, sometimes it can be polluting the mind because not necessarily all the information in is correct. But I guess this is something I should mention with a lot of people who say somebody is a misinformation agent. The thing is, with a lot of these people, yeah, they might have some things wrong, but they might also have a lot of things right. So just declaring them a misinformation agent, I can think of a few names off the top of my head, but I'm not going to tell them. It doesn't do you any favours, because then you could also be missing out on the good stuff. The thing is, when you really become a truther, is that you listen to anyone and anything, even the ones that you totally think are wrong and totally think you've got everything wrong there. You still listen and you absorb, and then you use your discernment, and you can say, well, okay, some of that stuff is actually quite correct, some of it is quite wrong. Yeah, in fact, that's how I first came across Flat Earth, when I listened to Eric Dubay's 200 Proofs. And I'm like, a lot of this stuff he's speaking is actually absolute shit, but a lot of it is actually really good. And so when you use your discernment and you say, well, he's certainly opened up my mind to the possibility, I'm going to investigate further. But I'm not going to rule out everything he says just because some of the things I think are absolute shit. And that's how it is for basically any teacher that comes across. You know, I can't even think of his name, if it's actually, is it Alex Jones? Something like that anyway. Yeah, I used to watch a lot of his stuff, but then you can see, using discernment, how some of it's absolute crap. But doesn't mean that maybe the other 70, 80% isn't true. And so I think that's how a lot of these people get away with it, is they can tell a lot of truths because that's what their job is. Their actually job is to reveal enough of the truth. But then when they put enough disinformation in, it sort of allows them to get away with it because they've told us the truth. But then they've also fooled us with lies. And I don't know, I think there's a certain rule in whatever you call it, let's just call it karmic law, that people who want to commit great evil don't experience karma if they've informed you of what they're going to do and you give consent, which you often do by silence. Silence to them means consent. So if they feel as though they've informed you of something that they're going to do, like some great, terrible, tragic event or future wipeout of 80% of the human population or something, and you don't stand up and do something about it, well, they will just say, well, silence means consent. We told you. We've been telling you this for years. You didn't do anything. You've consented. And therefore they've annulled themselves of any karma. It's a sick sort of way of looking at it, but I guess that's how they've learnt to find the loopholes in natural law so that they themselves don't suffer as bad a personal karma as you might otherwise if you just turned around and did what you're going to do without informing people in the first place. Anyway, it is getting a bit late here too. I don't know if I'll keep going too much longer. Let's just have a quick look through the anti-desalination. I'm actually right into desalination. It's just going to be done right. I mean, salt, this is actually something probably worth mentioning since I'm talking about natural healing. Salt is an excellent health product. Sodium chloride, on the other hand, is not. Table salt, as they call it, sodium chloride is basically just another form of chlorine, which is a toxin, which is why doctors and so on have been telling us for so long to cut down on our salt levels. But real salt, which comes from the ocean, which contains all the essential minerals that our bodies need, is a super health product. And you can't have too much, just as you can have anything. Obviously, you don't overdo it. But it acts as the catalyst? Probably not the right word. It acts as the method for how osmosis occurs for nutrients and so forth to go back and forth between our cells, the osmotic process. Salt is essential for that. So cutting out salt altogether is actually really bad for your health. It's an essential thing for our bodies. We must get it. Every time I go to the ocean, I make sure when I'm having a body bash, I make sure I'll drink a little bit. I don't take big mouthfuls or anything, but I'll certainly fill my mouth occasionally and swish it around and have that little swallow. Just as I say, once again, the more you starve your body of nutrients, the more your body seeks them and takes full advantage of them. The opposite side we see of that is perfect in like the Western world where people eat a lot of dairy. It's got so much calcium in it that what the body does to compensate for that is it draws calcium out of the bones and causes osmosis. I can't even think of the word now. It just went straight out my head. Causes osteoporosis, weakening of the bones, because when you get too much of something, your body needs to get rid of it. So let me get back onto desalination again for a second, because this is a massive topic for me. Many years back, way back when I was right into super health and everything, and being super aware of running a pet store and driving around in the beautiful hillsides between Bangalow and Byron daily, I started to notice chemtrails. And the more I looked into it, the more I realised what a sinister operation is going on trying to control our weather. And so eventually I came to the point how we can combat it. And you don't combat it with war. The best defence is the best offence in some cases. Sometimes a good offence is the best defence. But in this case, I thought, well, let's have a good defence against chemtrails. And eventually, long story short, I realised that the best way was to be building large, very large glass domes. And the way you would do that, well, you need sand to make glass. So you'd be needing to make large glass blocks which fitted together like kind of jigsaw, Lego, almost like pieces, but very much like big slanted wedges that locked into one another as you started around the base, and you kept building up and round into massive, massive domes. And by pumping the sand out of the ocean, you'd also be pumping out a lot of water, which water is essential to life. And then when you pump that water into the middle of your dome, and it's enclosed now, your natural desalination process happens through evaporation. And then you collect the pure water down around the edges, which you then use to grow your food, and then you've got this great salt left behind without doing it in a harmful process like desalination plants might. So that's basically where I was coming from my desalination concept, is that it's actually a way of combating rising sea levels, recovering sand from the ocean, recovering water and returning it into fresh water, and using the salt as the salt of the earth, as we need, as an essential living mineral element for our health and vitality. And then you can be using the water then to be growing food aquaponically, which means that wastes are basically going back through worm composting. The worms are feeding your fish are then feeding your plants, the plants are producing all the oxygen you need. Your dome is protecting you from all the pollutants being put out there by the pollutants that want to kill us and poison us and turn us into 5G robots. Meanwhile, we're producing perfect organic food, we're breathing pure air, we've controlled our environment, we're no longer affected by floods or severe weather or cold or anything else. And even back then, I was still of a mind that we lived on a planet that might be suffering something called a polar shift once in every 10 or 11,000 years. And so I thought, well, let's go one step further and not just build a dome, but let's build it underground as well. So we make a great big bauble. So then our land becomes a floating landmass on a bed of water. And no matter what happens then, the biggest tsunamis, biggest tidal waves, biggest storm events, tidal, polar flipping, you name it, the normal sort of natural events, as they say, that kill off every living thing that's not an aquatic creature bigger than the size of a wombat. All of a sudden now we're an enclosed system which could survive anything. The most tumultuous seas, being thick, multi-metre thick glass walls, it'd be nuclear bomb-proof. Nothing could get into it. And the floating landmass, no matter how much it got rocked around, the worst that would happen is that the land would sort of wobble around a bit. And that's what sort of got me into thinking. That's what got me into thinking is, hang on a second. What if that's already the Earth model we live in, only bigger? And that's what our tides are, is because we're already in a great big giant bauble. The Earth is flat and level and it's all floating. And that's why we have tides, because we're gently rocking around a bit and everything's enclosed within a dome, but it's so big that we still get natural weather events. And so that maybe if we make smaller versions of that, we might actually overcome all the limitations that we currently experience here on Earth. That's what first got me onto the whole flat Earth thing years back, when I started thinking, hang on a second, what if they've already done that? And I'm just picking up on old ancient ideas from people who've done even greater things than I've ever dreamt of doing. Even though my ideas are bigger than the pyramids, it could still be done. We could still do it. We could still build really large glass domes, like, size to cover a city, and then build another one adjoined with it in the circle of life fashion, so that each one makes the next one stronger and stronger and stronger. And every time we did one, we've solved multiple problems, because we can get rid of parasites from within them in the first place, make sure they never enter, and make sure if they do, then that one gets shut off and decontaminated. So we get rid of all parasites, internal, external, all the ones that we don't want, all the nasty bugs, the nasty deadly snakes, whatever that we don't want to have in them. We eradicate all diseases by not letting vaccinated people in who are carrying the diseases. We could basically create an eternal paradise where we don't even need to live in houses. We've solved homelessness, we've solved starvation, we've solved disease, we've solved all the things that make life difficult, and then we can get on to doing finer things, creating greater inventions, creating greater music, greater arts, greater things. That was one of the things I was putting out years and years ago, how we could do that by building very large glass domes. We'd also be solving homelessness for a lot of poor people. There are poor people all around the world, yet we've got vast empty spaces all across Australia. They're uninhabitable as they are at the moment, yet these people would gladly come and volunteer their labour for a chance at new life in a new land where they're treated as real human people, where they could join a decent society who's grateful for their contribution and basically can allow us to be lazy bastards. They're building a new Tower Eden project in a place called Morecambe Bay, England. Mussel shaped like the shellfish. Okay. I'm sure there's plenty of ways of doing it. But my understanding is that the dome is the strongest structure that can sort of withstand any sort of stress. And unlike the pyramid, which pyramids have stood the test of time because that's also a very strong structure, but it's not a I'm getting tired there. It's not very. Hang on. There we go. It's not a very economical use of the space. It's a very, very strong structure. But a dome is also strong and a very economical use of the space and functional. And because it's made of clear glass, the sunlight can still get through and evaporate the water and grow all your food, and just eliminates all those weather problems and stuff that we suffer if we tried to live outdoors all the time. It gets cold at night, but the dome would hold the temperature in, keep it constant all the time, keep it at a constant 24 degrees. That's what I keep my tropical fish at. So that 24 degrees is the optimum temperature for comfort, for growth, and we wouldn't lose any water because as it evaporates and hits the outer sides of or the inside of the dome, we just collect it in drains around the edges. Bam, we've got pure water again, purified by the power of the sun as well, UV sterilised, ready to go back into our fish, and then we just add a bit more salt back into it because, well, if it's only from evaporation you don't have to add extra salt, but the fish do benefit from salt as well. That's what helps them with their breathing and osmosis. Even freshwater fish have to have salt in their water, as I would know from all my years of having a pet store and aquarium business. Yeah, salt is just a necessity of life. It's what keeps things flowing. The salt of the earth. Apparently, even some places like Indonesia and where they had the tsunami some years back, the Boxing Day tsunami, where it got flooded with that salt water, when it recovered, the land became far more fertile. So yes, too much salt is not good for the ground, but the right amount is excellent for it. Puts all the right nutrients and everything back into it and grows good, healthy food again. So I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to talk about tonight. I think it's time I got some sleep. It's nearly midnight and I've got a competition game of bowls tomorrow. Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Major Flat D. It's good to see you. We'll have to catch up one of these days and have an actual conversation, I reckon. I appreciate you sticking around. Not many people do, to be honest. But Mark Swarbrick, you're one that does. You're a legend too, mate. And oh, hello, we got the pig den. What's funny, mate? It's only midnight. Hang on. Let me see what it really is then. Oh, you're not even bloody turned on. Hold on. Not any Japanese music going over here, but the time doesn't come up. But why would I think it's funny? It's only midnight. 6 a.m. there in Texas. I think that's completely normal. Because on the flat earth, the sun is the hour hand. And so if it's about midnight here, then the sun would be pretty much coming up over in Texas. That seems about perfectly right to me. No, I think you're 6 a.m. I think you're only coming into Friday morning, if I'm not mistaken. Here it's basically Saturday morning. Oh, nearly worked. Come on. One more window shut. There we go. Oh, it's only 11:39 p.m. in our daylight savings time. It's exactly how I'd expect it to be, because the sun is basically the hour hand on a 24-hour clock as it goes around and around. It goes around the equator. This is one thing not even many flat earthers understand. They seem to think that it makes a bigger circle when it goes around the Tropic of Capricorn and a smaller circle when it goes around the Tropic of Cancer. But in actual fact, it goes around the equator the entire time, but it goes up and down to create the seasons. When it's furthest down, that's December 22nd, and that's when it appears to be so much closer to us, it appears to go south. Because remember, we're always looking up at it. When you're looking up at something, as it gets further away, it'll appear to take a smaller circle, which means it appears to go north. As it comes down, it appears to go south. When it crosses the equator twice per year, that's the equinoxes. And I'm going to make a video on this one shortly, and very detailed with diagrams and everything. I'm going to get out the whiteboard and show how it's done. But the sun and a lemma in that figure 8, we've possibly all seen pictures of that. The analemma, the equinoxes are the crossover point where it crosses over twice per year. And the smaller circle, as we've always seen in the normal figure 8, is always at the top. That's because the sun is furthest away from us, so it appears to make a smaller circle. When it's down lower, it appears to make a larger circle, and that's when it's at the south. So when we take these pictures once per month, one day per month, with the camera facing at the exact same place at the same time every day, takes a picture of the sun, and you put them together, it makes this analemma. It's a figure 8. And that's why, when it's on the inner part of the equator, it's higher, makes the smaller circle. And because it's higher, it shines more on the northern centre, which is why that's when the north gets summer. Then when it's lower, of course, it appears to go south, because that's how we see it. So it is south, in a sense. But in reality, it's still always going around the exact same 24-hour circuit around the equator. So that's why it never speeds up nor slows down. Constantly appears to move 15 degrees per hour. That's again another more complicated one to explain, because perspective means we see it moving in this pyramid line from our perspective. That's why we will see it appearing to go up, rising, appearing to go down, setting on the set square, because That's how perspective works. It doesn't mean that's how it is. Everything is an optical illusion, including the sun, distant objects. Everything is an optical illusion. So, yeah, it's too late for me to go into all of that at the moment, but I will be doing another video shortly, hopefully this weekend if time permits, where I'll explain all this in great detail, all these things about perspective. Yeah. Yeah. The trouble is, we think when we look across at something, we don't realise that we're looking at something that's up really high. We think that what we see is what we get, but it's not. That's hence why the Freemasons have their symbol with the all-seeing eye, which is the sun, Lucifer the light bearer, taking this great pyramid line above the set square with the motto, always on the level, because it is always on the level. Parallel lines appearing to make what I call Thatcher's law of perspective. But yeah, I look forward to making that one soon and explaining it in great detail and trying to hopefully put everybody's mind to rest on how perspective really works and why we see what we see. Because it's pretty straightforward once you understand it. Once you get it, once you grasp it, you'll say, now I've got it. It's so simple. And until then, all you're left doing is scratching your head and saying, oh, why does the sun rise and set if we're not on a spinning ball? Unfortunately, that's the educational level that we've all been brought up with, and it takes time to get through to people. I do my bit. Anyway, I'll see you all around. Good to see you all, and thanks for joining me.